420, 420, for 20 long years. I smoked lots of reefer, drank lots of beer. Every day at 420, we're gonna settle the score. And for 20 long years, it's been 20 past 4.
Hello, welcome to 420 Live. I'm Jeff Kravitz. It is Wednesday. It's probably the end of our week here at 420 Live, as tomorrow we get back into the work pool, dive back into the cesspool, the work pool. Hollywood life is a giant cesspool, and I'm getting ready to get back in. I have my hazmat suit on, and I'm all vaccinated. I cleared my body of anything that might get in the way, and I am ready to dive into the Jake Paul and Ben Askren fight on Saturday night. It is the new land of boxing, where we're going to go in, and the Instagrammers and the YouTubers are all fighting each other now, which is great. I just saw today that Lamar Odom is going to fight Aaron Carter in Atlantic City in June. So, you know, this is what we get, folks. This is our entertainment. Our post-COVID entertainment is going to be all the people you've been watching online beating themselves up for your pay-per-view pleasure, a pay-per-view event too. So, but this weekend we have Justin Bieber, and we have Black Keys, and we have Saweetie and Diplo and Major Lazer and Snoop's new act Westmore and all this amazing stuff, you know. So I'm pretty excited to get on a plane tomorrow and go to Atlanta. And I am going to try to go live either Thursday or Friday before the fight. You know, I'd love to grab Snoop in the corner and blaze away with him and have a little 420 with Snoop. He's always been on my hot list of guests to have on the show. And, you know, if you were here yesterday, you sat with me through some of the most major technical internet difficulties. You know, one thing about, we're on show 233 or 234 today. And the one thing I've learned in all my hours of going live on the internet is it's a crapshoot. You know, you go to start and sometimes your guests are locked out or they can't hear you or whatever. So I've learned to roll with a lot of things that have happened over the internet. So hello to our Twitch crowd. What's up there, Homer? Guys from Twitch really came in strong this week. Made my Monday show so crazy. So Ben Askren right here winning 100%. I'm interested to see. Jake looks like he's been training. So are you actually betting on that fight, or is it going to be the kind of thing where you're just going to watch? I'm just going to watch. I don't put my money on fights. I put my money in Dogecoin. Congratulations to all my friends that have been sitting in it. Your money made 85% last night from 5 to 12. I mean, incredible what's happening. That's even more than 85%, isn't it? 5 to 12. That's like 140%, 130%. So I have maybe $100 in Dogecoin. I'm like, I'm not going to put a lot of money in there. But, you know, you want to be involved with the spectacle because it's going on and you're reading about it. And you're like, who knows? Maybe your $300 investment could turn into millions. If you put $300 into Bitcoin back in the day, like 13 months ago, it'd be worth quite a bit right now. What did I say? 13? 60,000? 63,000 right now, Bitcoin? So, silly fight, not going anywhere. Yes, you want to see Jake get humbled. I think that's the whole thing. You want to watch the obnoxious guy get his ass kicked. And they're betting that people are going to want to pay to see that. So, it's a pretty interesting strategy on having fights. Because in the old days, you would not be paying to see anybody fight except for major boxers. Ali, the first pay-per-views I ever saw were Ali by satellite, Thriller from Manila, you know, in Atlantic City Convention Hall back there in the 70s. Remember being a kid and going to that, watching that on the big screen, big black and white screen. And you're just like watching it go up and trying to comprehend in those days about something that goes up to space and then gets beamed down to you. Now we act every day. We have these little things here and we act like it's second nature, that information's coming to you, that you can answer any question. You can find out any information. You know, where would we be without the web? Which brings us to our guest today, John Battelle. John Battelle is the author, entrepreneur, and marketing genius, old friend of mine. We've been friends now 15 years ago, 16 years ago. He showed up at Bonnaroo, and the rest is history. Welcome, my friend, John Battelle.
Hey, how you doing, Jeff?
Good, John. How are you?
I'm really good. I was I was listening to your intro there, and I got through my partner at my current company, the Recount, John Heilman, dragged me to Vegas to see the McGregor Mayweather fight in 2017, I think it was. It was like such a big deal. It was like this MMA, like old school versus new school, and it wasn't that good of a fight. Mayweather won.
Yeah, I remember. And that was one of the first real spectacle fights. I mean, there's always been exhibition boxing, right? That's always been a thing. But now they're really taking it up with these guys. And there's no real entertainment now on that level where people are paying per view. We talked about it a little bit in the beginning about how our lives used to be network destinations. We'd sit there and consume ABC, NBC, CBS, and maybe a little HBO on the side.
Yeah.
And now that's changing. What we're decentralizing, I guess.
Absolutely. I mean, I think I was very involved in what people call Web 1, the internet from 95 to 2001. And then I was super involved in what people call Web 2, which is kind of 2002 to 2012. And then from 2012 till now, who knows what the hell we call it? What was the last 10 years? It doesn't really have like a name. It's more like the great stagnation of Facebook, Google, Amazon, Apple kind of just taken over everything. The re-centralization of the web has been the last 10 years, right? And I think we're just at this really awesome moment where it's blowing apart again. And that you see that with the networks, right? With the big television networks, they're going through that because of OTT streaming. But it's happening, it's now, a lot of people call it Web 3. But, my preferred terminology is decentralized web. And it's a big deal. And obviously underneath it all is what you mentioned, the blockchain, which Bitcoin is a blockchain, but only one of many. And there's so much more that can be done with that. That's super exciting. I haven't felt this way about the internet since like 1993. Like it's a big deal what's going on right now.
So you feel like we're on the cusp of a new era?
I do. I do 100%. And it's about fucking time.
And do you think push there because of the COVID situation and where we've been in the past year too?
Yep. I don't think we would have gotten as fast as we did to where we are if it weren't for all the consumer behaviors that changed over COVID. I mean, for example, the whole Reddit, GameStop, phenomenon. That was always there. There were always a bunch of people there for the lulls and doing stuff and trying to coordinate action, but they never really broke through to the like cultural moment that happened with GameStop. And that happened because COVID relief checks showed up and if people had like a few $100 to blow, and B, people are fucking stuck in their house and they're bored out of their minds. They wanted to do something online. And C, Robinhood, like, this app just, which made it super easy to do this and to coordinate your activities over platforms like Reddit. And then you had all these kind of cultural icons like Elon Musk and, Jack Dorsey and others just saying, bash it, let's go, and I think it was pretty unique to the COVID environment that broke out like that.
Well, before it was they tried to do Bitcoin, what was it, about 5 or 6 years ago, right?
Well, it's been an up and down thing. There was a big winter sort of, it's called the crypto winter, sort of 2018, 2019. Anyone who's smart enough to load up then is very happy right now.
Yeah, and you have to have the patience. Like everybody I talked to is like, oh, I bought it at 3,000, but then it got up to 8,000 and I sold it.
Yeah, I mean, I have a very close friend who will remain nameless who basically said, I'm never, ever selling it.
Wow.
I'm holding it forever and giving it to my kids.
What do you think the upside is? Do you think it's infinity and beyond?
Well, yes, I think the upside, I mean, because this is of all the kinds of cryptocurrencies that exist, this is, there are others that have limited mintings. This only has 21 million coins. And as you get closer to 21 million, they get harder to get. And therefore the theory goes more valuable. Now, this comes with the massive caveat that it could also crash. Because, money, currency, value is nothing but a collective hallucination. That's all it is.
Well, it used to be gold standard back in the day.
Yeah, but we lost that a while ago. So, now it really is just, do you believe in it? Do you not believe in it? Right? I don't think it can ever go completely to zero, because now there's too many institutions involved. There's too much actual fiat currency backing it.
You're talking about Bitcoin you're talking about.
Yeah.
Well, how about our dollar? What's supporting that? Because to me, that's the biggest piece of bullshit in the world.
Well, what's supporting that is the U.S. military. I mean, that's what's supporting that. It's like, so that's not going away either. But the truth is that it is everything's a fiction, man. That's why we listen to music.
That's why we
go to shows.
Yeah. Well, it just seems like the bullshit has really picked itself up. It's kind of time. It's multiplied.
Oh yeah. Well, we see that. I mean, it's one of the reasons, I decided to do the company that I'm doing now, is because the amount of misinformation and bullshit in the world is just at an all-time high. And it's not begun. It has completely infected the world of journalism.
Yeah, I mean, you can't tell what's true and what's a lie anymore.
And so, to our mind, my partner and I and all the folks we work with now at the Recount, the job is to identify the truth and hold it to power. That's literally the job. This is true. Here's proof. You're full of shit. That's the job in one line.
Yeah, but it just seems like the people that need to hear the truth don't care.
Well, we have just exited a 4-year streak of monumental shamelessness
and bullshit and lying and deceit.
Yeah.
And also throwing everything about reality and what's true and what's right out the window.
Gaslighting, it's called.
Yes. And it's amazing how much the temperature has come down since Biden's been in.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. We're all about grandpa with a warm glass of milk. That's all good.
Well, yeah, we're ready for boring after we had grandpa who ate too many meds for 4 years. What actually, like, I've been seeing all the support for Trump from the Republican Party, and it's just beyond me to wrap my head about why these guys would keep trying to keep him involved. Why wouldn't you just try to cut him loose and try to
this is just base level politics. He has a base that is incredibly active in primaries, in the primary elections, that lead up to the generals. And so if you're a sitting congressman, and this sort of 25 to 33% of the voting of the voting bloc in the United States is rabidly pro-Trump, and you are captive to Trump essentially telling them to primary you, to not vote for you, and so you have to pander to them, even if you don't believe in it. And believe me, the number of Republicans who think Trump is a lunatic and wish he would just go away is very high. But they can't because they can't afford to be primary to lose to a pro-Trump candidate. They don't want to lose their seat. It's always about whether or not you have power. And so you saw that behavior, during the sort of period of time between the election and the final certification of the results in January. Almost no Republicans spoke up and said, you know what, Biden won. They didn't say it because they didn't want that held against them in the next election. And that behavior continues to this day because they don't want to get primaried.
Well, isn't there going to be a faction that's already fracturing inside the party, where you got the Liz Cheneys and Mitch McConnell's on one side saying, Trump lost, Biden won, and then you got your Corwins and everybody else that's still trying to blow smoke up Trump's ass?
Yeah, you do, and you just have to trace the politics to see why people feel comfortable or not comfortable being able to say those things. It really just comes down to whether they have control of their base. Mitch Romney knows he's going to get reelected in Utah. He's not worried about it.
Right.
So he can say what he wants to say, but unlike Mitt, somebody, who's in a seat that is dominated by Trump supporters, they're not going to mess with that. And Trump, of course, loves the idea that he has control over the Republican Party. It's his party. Right. And so, he's more than happy to exercise that power, even though he doesn't have a platform like Twitter to just tweet at people and, you know, strike fear in the heart of people through a tweet. He still can make a lot of people's lives miserable, particularly politicians in the Republican Party.
Well, what do you think about the censorship of Twitter? What do you think about their ability to be able to shut people off like that?
I think they have absolutely every right to do it. I don't have a problem with it at all. I literally have no problem with it. It's not a violation of the First Amendment, first of all, because that's all about government overreach, not private company overreach. I do think that platforms have to think long and hard about what their policies are as it relates to, you know, speech that incites violence, which is essentially the reason that Trump was kicked off. Misinformation, disinformation, lying, right? They've had unclear and conflicting policies about this stuff, particularly as it relates to public figures like, you know, the president. And that's, I think you can beat them up for that, but I don't think you can beat them up for exercising, you know, ultimately their authority and ability to kick someone off the platform if that person is violating clearly stated principles.
Well, it is pretty amazing that they kicked the president of the United States off of Twitter while he was still in office.
And not only that, it's not just Twitter, right? I mean, it's Facebook, Google, you know,
YouTube, Instagram,
a bunch of hosting companies. You know, it was Snapchat, right? I mean, it was a full court press,
right?
And a lot of this is politics. The reason that all happened on the date it happened, it was the day or two after the Georgia Senate runoff, where both Democrats won, and all of a sudden the Senate flipped over to the Democratic side. Right now, you've got air cover, and you know that you're not going to have the Senate coming after you. Right. So, okay, now I'm going to do it. Right. You can always trace it back to that. You know, follow the power.
Yeah, they want to make sure that they're not going to get burned later on. So they knew that they had friendlies inside. But there's still a lot of investigation going on. I saw you talking about 230 on your blog, and you know that Trump trying to pass 230.
Yeah, well, he wants to get rid of it. I mean, so for those folks who may not, be stoning out on internet on really old internet law. Section 230 is a clause of a mostly repealed law called the CDA, Communication Decency Act, which passed in 1996. And it states that platforms will not be liable for the content that's posted by their users, but they have the right to moderate that content against community principles for the platform. Usually, if you have the right to moderate, if you're acting like an editor or a publisher, you are therefore liable for that content. That was true in broadcast and in print, where scale wasn't as big an issue. But there's no way without CDA 230, there's no way you could have YouTube. There's no way you could have the platform we're on now or Twitch. You know, you just couldn't have it. So it was a compromise, and it was a pretty elegant compromise. I'm a fan of the law myself. And I'm not a fan of the attacks on it, which are coming both from the left and the right.
So you want to keep it where it is.
Yeah. And
Biden does too, though, correct? Or?
Well, they've been a little wishy-washy on this. Biden, the candidate, when he was, running, called initially for the repeal of it because he thought, well, the big tech companies are too big and powerful. They should be doing more to manage the mis and disinformation on their networks, which have essentially, if you go back to 2016, one could make a very strong argument that the reason that Trump won was because Facebook was doing a terrible job of moderating bullshit that was saying untrue things about Hillary Clinton and untrue things about Trump that were positive to Trump and negative to Clinton. And you had Russian actors and Chinese actors, but you really had a lot of domestic actors and Trump himself just pumping really terrible, vile, toxic shit through the bloodstream of Facebook and YouTube. And Facebook and YouTube did not do much to stop it. And so the Democrats say, get rid of 230 because it's allowed these guys to basically let bad information run rampant through our, national discourse. And then the Republicans say, get rid of 230 because it's letting Facebook censor us, kick Trump off, right? kick off Alex Jones of InfoWars and so on. So they're arguing from completely two different sides for the same thing. Biden, since saying that he thought repealing it was a good idea, now says that it needs to be studied, and he might be, very interested in reforming it, adding clauses, different use cases where, basically complicating it, muddying it up, which I think, frankly, they'll do a terrible job of and would not be good.
Yeah. So the way it reads right now is where you want it to stay.
I think so.
Yeah. Well, it seems to be working.
Yeah. But I think there's a lot of other things you could do that have nothing to do with 230 when it comes to cleaning this mess up. And frankly, that's where we get back to what we talked about at the beginning, which is the decentralized web. I think there's basically an old colleague of mine who I've known for decades now, Mike Basnick, calls it the protocol-driven web. But essentially require that all of these platforms essentially open up their platforms as a protocol so other people can build on top of them. So imagine that you were like an entrepreneur, you wanted to start another social network. Well, you have a coordination problem. You need to get tens of millions of people from Facebook to your new network. And until they're all there, there's no value of the network, right? But what if you could bring your whole friend group over, and the first time one of your friends showed up this other place, the whole network was intact, right? So this idea of an open sort of machine readable, data portable, protocol driven internet, that's part of the decentralized web. I'm geeking out a little bit, so forgive me, but
that's fine.
But it's cool. And I think it's going to happen. Whether or not the law helps it along, I think it's inevitable.
So where do we go social media wise from here? We've had the Facebook, you had the Instagram. You and I were in a business called Crowdfire back in the day, where our idea was to take pictures from the crowd and put them up on the screens of concerts so people could see each other in between the shows and stuff like that. And that was before Instagram, right?
That was before Instagram. That was the first year of Twitter. It was like the first year that Facebook was off at the EDU, and you could actually have a Facebook account if you weren't at a college. I think it was 2007, maybe.
Yeah.
That was crazy that we didn't develop that into a bigger business. We're just idiots. I mean, that's Instagram basically now, right?
Right.
And everybody just says tag the hashtag, and then they just run the hashtags on all the big screens at the festivals, right?
It's unbelievable.
Yeah. I think the biggest problem with social networks is that they're all like the Gap. They're all like just these big kind of stores where there's not a lot of nuance, right? Everybody's wearing khakis and button-down shirts, and it's just they haven't evolved beyond to the nuance of true social communication that you do face to face, And so some of the stuff that I'm excited about, I know you're involved in, and some of our other pals in the industry are involved in, have to do with reimagining social networks, not as like places you go, but as presumptive features of experiences that you have, whether it's a show, or a event of any kind. The ability to rapidly assemble a social network. That's what you do when you you go to the Independent in San Francisco, and you're going to see a band. And you're having an experience, and you look over and there's a friend you haven't seen in 7 years, right? And then the connection's made, and the experience is had. Like, that doesn't really happen anymore on social networks. It's all performative. It's all like, I've got to put my shit up and look good and get likes and be retweeted and whatever. I think that there's a much more nuanced way to express yourselves online that isn't about the centralization of a platform, and more about the ability to quickly connect in a social experience, no matter where you're doing what you're doing. And it should be distributed to all experiences on the internet, and not limited just to, I'm going to Facebook, I'm going to Instagram, I'm going to Twitter. And so there's a lot of development around that is exciting. And I think we're going to see some cool stuff break out probably in the next 2 to 3 years.
Well, right now, everybody's hanging on Decentraland. You familiar with this? Decentraland.org?
Mm-hmm. I'm not hung out there.
But basically, Decentraland.org is like Second Life. And
right.
It was built on the Bitcoin, built on the blockchain. Right. And all the real estate in that land has been moving based on where you portal into the land. And they're sold, I think, like 10 pieces of property or 15 pieces of property for like $500,000 last week. So there's real numbers in the real estate. You can go in here and order a pizza at Domino's, and then it shows up at your front door in the real world.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, everything new is everything old is new again, right? I mean,
right.
But what's different about this that is super important is the underlying plumbing has a completely distinct architecture from the centralized architecture of the platforms that we're used to. So it enables, all the code base of that you just described is immutable on the blockchain, right? And it's essentially fundamentally open source, which means you can fork it and go make another world, right? And so it's all about where do people want to settle, which is what creates the real estate prices, right? Do people want to settle? And they all agree they want to settle in here. But if for some reason, like, the Bay Area during the fires last year, people are like, fuck this, I want to get out of here. They can go make another community, and they can bring their whole, bring lock, stock, and barrel. They can bring their value with them. And this ability to not have to depend on a centralized platform for value exchange, currency, right? For contracts, like I own this piece of thing, this is mine. For data ownership, for all the stuff that creates value for human beings. To be able to outsource that, not to a corporation like Facebook, but to a decentralized, trustless environment called the blockchain, enables entirely new worlds to be imagined. And so that's exactly what you're seeing there. I expect that that's going to break into the public conscience, again, in the next 2 to 3 years, I think.
Oh, I would hope so. Where do you see social networks going? Do you see the emergence of a new social network coming about? And like, what would that entail? What would the next one be? I mean, TikTok to me right now is kind of crazy because it's like an educational platform. My kids go on there to learn things.
My daughter, I said, because I run a news, a video news, distributed video news platform. And so of course I'm interested. When I asked my 17-year-old, my youngest daughter, I'm like, where do you get your news? She's like, well, TikTok and YouTube. And I'm like, okay, I need to see what you're looking at. She's like, no, it's like, she's like, I trust this person and that person. This person is funny, but seems like they know what they're talking about, whatever. I don't think TikTok is a social network. I think TikTok's an entertainment network. I mean, initially it was understood to be a social network, but I really don't think that's what it is. It is really, really good at giving you shit that entertains you. I mean, it's fantastic at that. But I don't know. I mean, I've made predictions about social networks in the past. Last year, I predicted that a new social network was going to break out that was going to be based around communications like Signal, right? Where there's a trust because it's encrypted. That has not happened. There's a bunch of Alexis Ohanian just invested in a social network that's avatar based, setting up for a VR, AR kind of social network expression. But to me, that doesn't feel different enough yet. It's like just because you could put on goggles or have an avatar, that doesn't feel like something super new. It feels like the same thing with a better set of glasses, I'm not sure. I don't know.
Well, because I'm working in the VR space, and it really is intriguing when you're in there and you're in there with a couple of your friends and you start exploring and you start going through these different worlds and like you said, the worlds, and seeing what people are putting together and the art that they put up, and to go in there and watch performance or comedian. They have open mic nights. Microsoft has the alt space VR,
right?
They consider their social platform, and their media. Facebook has the venues, which is the same type of thing. You could slip in there and there's all kinds of performances and stuff.
Well, I think you're onto something in terms of what the next social network is going to be. It's going to be a place where you do things with people. And so when I think about what probably the most interesting social networks that have broken out in the last few years, it's Roblox and Twitch. It's Discord. It's these places where people hang out to be with other people, and to be honest, that was Usenet in late 1980s, early 1990s. I mean, that was the well. That was early Facebook, right? It's like, we want to hang out with other people. Give me a better experience, and I'll go do that, right? And if you think about it, nobody under 30 years old is hanging out on Facebook, except maybe because they have to, because their high school like reunion page is there, and it's like how they find out what other people are doing after they left high school. But they're not hanging out there because they want to, right? They're hanging out on Twitch, they're hanging out on multiple Discords, they're hanging out on Roblox. I mean, game environments, you know, they're doing shit together, and that's you know, you noticed that we talked about that earlier. Like, that's a big shift for the web. It's the experiential web is like here, man. It's like here.
Well, especially after the past year where we've been so isolated.
Right.
Now, we'll take any kind of communication with our friends, even if it's in a virtual world.
Totally. I think, you know, it's not going to happen. Not going to happen. But I think there was a minute there where Zoom could have become a incredibly cool social network. You know, there was just a minute when absolutely everyone got a Zoom account, right? And like, what are you going to do with it? I don't want to just have fucking meetings. You know, like, what else could I do? You know, I called him up. I'm like, dude, you got to open this up as a developer platform right now and let people build cool shit on it, right? But, you know, they do have a developer platform, but it's very limited, sort of enterprise focused. So I think they missed that moment.
Yeah, but that is an area where people go in and hang. I mean, I don't know how it would. I guess people would have to build something cool for people to go hang out in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or some kind of gamification or something. You could play great games on Zoom and stuff like that.
Sure. Sure. You know? The amount of drinking I've done on Zoom is probably embarrassing.
Well, now you changed locations. You were a California boy all your life. And like just before the pandemic, was it after the fires that you left?
Nope. I left before that. I left in the summer of 2018. I mean, the fires are always a problem. We always have, you know,
right.
You know, we always have.
But you lived in such an isolated place. I remember going up to your house, and the road up there, you could practically kill yourself driving up of it. And then you put yourself in the middle of New York City.
Dude, it was so different. And that was the reason I did it. I really wanted to kick myself in the pants a little bit and try something new. I mean, I'm a California dude, you know, I mean, I like 5th generation California, right? Grew up in LA, moved to Berkeley, stayed in NorCal for 30 plus years, you know, ended up in Marin for 25 of those years. And Marin is a really hard place to leave. Like, it is paradise, you know?
Yeah, beautiful.
And I'm really into the outdoors. I'm really into, you know, mountain biking and hiking and all that good stuff. And I mean, there's no better place in the world to smoke weed than, like, you know, in the hills of Marin, right?
Absolutely.
And
top of Mount Tam.
Top of Mount Tam, right? And so I felt like my 2 of my kids were out of the house. I had this humongous house, you know, and it was just like rattling around in there. One of my daughters my last kid was going from 8th grade to 9th grade. And my wife and I just looked at each other. She's from New York, right? She had turned into a complete Marin person, let's be honest, but she's from New York. And we said, we need to mix it up. So we did exactly that, the complete opposite. We went straight into downtown New York City and just landed there, just hard, just went there and got an apartment in West Chelsea and started a company, started teaching at Columbia, you know, just kind of went all in on New York. And I'll tell you, New York is, you know, it's New York. It's really demanding place. It demands your energy. It demands your attention. It does not give a flying fuck about you. It demands that you give a flying fuck about it. Right. Right. And Marin's like, whatever you want to do, man, it's all good, you know? And so, you know, for the first year, I was so busy and so into it, you know, just eating New York up and enjoying it. But right before the pandemic hit, I was starting to realize that it was draining. And all my friends who've lived in New York a long time said, dude, your problem is you don't have a place to go. Like, the only way to do New York is to know how to get out of it. You know, like, I got a friend I have a friend who has a house up the Hudson Valley. You know, I have this favorite campground I go to twice a month. I'm a biker and I ride, you know, I take the train and I get out of the city and then I ride. Now, you got to have something you do to get out of New York in order to be able to handle it. So right before the pandemic, my mother's side of the family has lived on an island off of Massachusetts for 150 years, right? And I've been coming to this island my whole life. And I brought my family there just like in the summer for vacation. So we're like, okay, we live on the East Coast now. We're gonna get a cottage on that island just so we have a place to go to. And then boom, pandemic hit. So we just got out of New York and went there. And that's where I am right now. I'm sitting
Oh,
here.
so you've been there the whole year?
Yeah, I mean, I've gone back and forth to New York probably, 4 or 5 times, for a week or two. But for the most part, I'm back in nature, man. I'm back in, the ocean's right there. There's trees everywhere. There's squirrels jumping around.
But are you eventually going to go back to New York, or what do you think?
Oh yeah. Go back to New York, but I might take my sweet time. I kind of like it here.
What do you notice in the biggest changes in the city when you go back?
Well, the pulse is definitely down, right? And for the first few months, the weirdest thing in the world was walk around New York with a mask on. I mean, because New York's about yelling. People like fuck you, hey, taxi, like just yelling and being noisy. And so the quiet was eerie. It was weird how quiet the city was. But then, as people started to learn how to live with it, restaurants, sucked how hard the restaurant industry got hit, everywhere. But New York in particular was just like really terrible. But a lot of restaurants started reopening with outdoor dining, and the city government like let them take over the streets. And so outdoor dining started happening again, and that felt good. That felt better. A lot of shops opened up, and we all figured out how to wear masks. And New York was like 98% mask compliant. There was no messing around with the masks. So that was another thing I noticed about New York, is that people were like, we have to beat this thing. And so we're going to wear a mask. We're not going to gather. The only people who didn't do that were all the young kids, like my 23-year-old daughter, who had already gotten COVID. And so they started this underground scene in New York, exactly what you would expect. Speakeasies. They would get together. Someone would bring a DJ board and set up a sound system in some rented warehouse somewhere, and they party their brains out. My daughter, Chloe, who you've seen her at Outside Lands, she's a DJ now. So she's DJing all these secret club things and having a ball because she's got the antibodies, right? But it started to get, and I was back there last week for a couple of weeks, and it's starting to feel more like New York, because a lot of people are getting vaccinated, and the spring is happening, it's getting warmer, right? And there's a ray of optimism that's creeping into the city, which is nice to see.
Yeah, I think everywhere. I mean, the same thing here in California. People are getting out, and people are, everybody's ready for this to be over.
Totally.
So I'm in the same way. I just can't wait to get back to it and to be back in it. But I don't see my industry, as far as Hollywood, coming back in the same way. I mean, everything's going to come back a little bit different.
No, this is a thesis of the company I'm doing now. I mean, we're in news, right? Okay, so we're in television news. Call it that. Okay. We never wanted to be in traditional television news. We didn't want to do what we call suits on sets. Right? It's guys in suits talking at you and telling you what the news is, right?
Right.
That's old that's old industry, right? And our thesis was the biggest disruption in the entertainment media television space ever to happen is well underway, and basically has already happened if you're under 40 years old, right? No one under 40 years old, unless you're in the business, watches cable. They just don't, especially cable news. They hate it, as a matter of fact. So we wanted to make kind of a post-linear television experience around news, right? But the last year fucking accelerated it. It was it was our first year. It was 2020. And we went in thinking we're going to cover the biggest story in the United States in 2020, which of course was going to be the election, right? Nope. It was COVID, right? And like almost every other news organization, we had incredible, the size of our audience just blew us away. People wanted to know what was going on, and people were consuming news hand over fist. And we just happened to have a very tasty, high nutrition, meal to give them, which was our approach, was fast paced, no bullshit, short, but high quality. And I think that going forward, you're just not going to, and I think this small like news, what we've learned in news applies to the rest of the entertainment business. Like people are like, we want something new, and we want something that understands the context we're in. People are watching streaming, and they got this in their hand at the same time, right? Where's the media company that understands that, right? And it's emerging. I guarantee you it's emerging. It's coming. Multi-screen at the same time, multiple identities, understanding who you are without stealing your data and making you feel like you're being used. Like all this stuff is accelerating big time.
What, the stolen data thing always mystifies me, because I'm always like, what the hell are they going to do with my email and my cell phone number and, the information I put on the web?
They're going to target you ads. That's basically it.
You get that already where you're talking, you know how you're talking to somebody and the next thing you know, your Instagram pops up and there's an ad about what you were talking about 10 minutes ago.
Yeah. Well, it's not, I taught this as a case study in my class at Columbia last year, because one of my students, a grad student in policy, was like, that exact thing happened. She's like, I was talking to my boyfriend about moving to this neighborhood in Brooklyn. And then 10 minutes later, I got an ad for a gym in the very neighborhood in Brooklyn that I was talking about. And I'm like, no, they're not listening to your phone. What they are doing is paying attention to what you do on the web. You probably went and visited Zillow and checked out like rental units in Brooklyn, right? Or you might have even looked at the gym in Brooklyn, like in the last week or so, and then you went up on, and then it was part coincidence and part that there are these really sophisticated machines and very sophisticated algorithms that know, by the way, your cell phone is sitting next to your boyfriend's cell phone, and your boyfriend lives in that neighborhood. So they notice that your locations are in the same place, and they're going to send you an ad about it. Like the amount of sophistication is mind blowing, but they aren't actually listening to your conversations yet.
So is there a point to controlling our data now that everybody seems to have it? Facebook got hacked again. The Russians hacked us. Seems like everybody's hacking us and has all this information. But who's got the time to cull through the millions and millions of all this data?
Not you, not me, not anybody listening. The economy that I imagine happening going forward, which again is enabled by the decentralized internet that we discussed earlier, is one where there are user agents that we enable to do that for us on our behalf to accrue value to us, right? Right now, if you look at the 5 most valuable companies in the world, right, they are all data processing companies. They are all companies that are really good at doing that boring shit that we don't want to do, which is organize all of our data and exploit it, right? That's what Facebook, Microsoft, Apple, Google and Amazon are all really good at doing that. The amount of value that represents in our overall economy is trillions and trillions of dollars. If we could unlock that and not centralize that value in 5 companies, but rather decentralize it to everyone, that's the dream, right? But we all know we're not going to spend 3 or 4 hours a day managing our own data. We're just not going to do it, right? So we need agents who do it on our behalf, that we can instrument them and tune them, right? And they'll come at us with offers. And then I'll go, hey, Jeff, this guy gave me an offer. You ever heard of them? Oh, yeah, I use them. They're great. Okay, then I'll use them, right? And it's going to be that kind of an economy again. And it'll be cool. I've written a lot about that, by the way. If you have show notes or something, I can send you some links to it. Yeah,
but it almost sounds like collabing on Instagram is what you're talking about.
A little bit of that is already happening. Like, there's so many cool little entrepreneurial things that individuals and people together are doing on Instagram right now, right? Like, some guy like rebuilds a 67 Ford Mustang, show the whole process on Instagram, and then takes bids and auctions on it on Instagram, right? And that becomes his whole business, right? But that energy is too contained in these platforms, in my opinion. I think there's a bigger economy to be had if we could swap information with each other seamlessly. And we need a protocol layer to do that doesn't exist right now. We need a new information architecture for the internet. And by the way, it isn't new. It's the original information architecture that was envisioned by the pioneers of the internet in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. distributed, intelligence at the nodes, open, transparent.
So that you think that's what's kind of our next social media?
100%. We'll probably do a bunch more fatty things before that, this fad, that fad, point solutions that seem like they're going to be platforms, but aren't, Clubhouse comes to mind, but at the end of the day, I think the next thing that's going to feel like a really big social phenomenon is not going to have the look and feel or the architecture of a Facebook or an Instagram or a YouTube.
Yeah, well, Facebook, as you said, nobody over 30 uses Facebook, so that in a couple decades is going to skew out, if not sooner.
Well, it's one of the main reasons they bought Instagram, right? And what's interesting and probably worth paying attention to is with all the antitrust, rattlings that are going on right now against Facebook, Amazon, Google, they can't really buy the next thing because there's going to be too much scrutiny for them. If there's some cool new decentralized, protocol comes along that's, managed by a small company, backed by Alexis Ohanian, the founder of Reddit, they can't go buy it for $5 billion because the U.S. government will say, not anymore. You're too big.
Right. You have too many other ones like that too.
So there is this sunlight. And one of the worlds that I spend a fair amount of time in is the world of venture capital, right? I do some investing. I work with a lot of venture capitalists, and almost every company I've started, 6 out of 7 were backed by venture capitalists. So one of the things that venture capitalists stayed away from for a decade is they would not invest in an alternative search engine. They would not invest in an alternative social network, and they wouldn't invest in any new kinds of media companies because it was considered to be a desert because that space was owned by Facebook, Google, YouTube, so on, right? They're investing now, and that because they feel like there's now room to do something new, and that's exciting. That's a good sign.
Well, I'd be interested to see what that looks like.
Yeah, me too.
Because it's so crazy now with how much attention it takes. When I look at my screen time every day, when I get that report every week, you spend an average of 10 hours a day on your phone. And I'm like, really? Is it really 10 hours?
Yeah. I don't know if you follow this crazy bald dude named Scott Galloway. He's a professor at NYU. But he has a really good riff on this screen time thing in terms of understanding what the big companies are going to do in terms of their next moves. He breaks it down as all driven by the percentage of screen time. That's the only scarce resource there is. Jeff Kravitz has 10 hours a day. If I'm Apple, right, and I want to make more money from that, what do I buy to get some of that screen time? Well, if you happen to be like a Peloton guy, right, and you give Peloton like an average of 5-10 hours of screen time a week, they'll buy Peloton because it's more screen time, right? It's like literally they just want your attention, right? And that's interesting because at the end of the day, you didn't make the decision to give that to them, right? And so in a decentralized world, you could have an agent who decides whether or not they get that screen time and how you get paid back for it, right? Because literally the only thing that's truly scarce in our human economy is our attention. That's the only thing. It's very finite. You can't make more of it. You can stay up 24/7 and you still can't make more of it than 24 hours. Right. Pretty shitty attention after like 16 hours anyway.
Yeah, you start to lose it.
Right.
All right. So here we got a question. What are your thoughts on virtual events having a higher adoption rate by consumers because of the pandemic?
I'm really interested in where this is going to go. But so last year, I run this event for Procter & Gamble. I've been running it for 10 years. It's called Signal. For 9 years, it was in a big auditorium in Cincinnati. And all these people came in, Jack Dorsey and, Evan Spiegel, all these people who run all these companies would come in. I'd interview them and stuff. It was a great event. And it had like a WebEx component, right? Where people could watch it and, a couple thousand people would watch it, but like thousands of people would fight to get in that room, that 350 seat auditorium, right? And that was the scarcity was getting in that room. Last year, we converted it to a virtual event. We used Hopin, which at the time was not a big deal, right? When we contracted with Hopin, they were like 6 months old, right? And now it's a big virtual event platform. I think it's worth like a couple $2 billion now.
Wow.
But it was a 6-month-old startup when we worked with it. We had 9,000 people registered for that event. It completely changed the whole nature of, as a programmer, as a producer, it changed the whole nature of how I thought about the event. I ran the event from where I'm sitting, with multiple screens, and my idea, not particularly new, I don't think, but I told my team, we are running this like it's a live television shoot, right? Like we got to think about, all the guests are coming in, coming out. I want the feeling to be like there's a live studio audience watching and reacting, even though we didn't really have that, but we had, some features of Hopin that made it feel like people were engaged. It felt very V1, very first version, right? But I think where it's going is if people feel like they're going to have enough of a connected feeling virtually, they will not travel unless they have to. So I think there's a really big opportunity here to reimagine how events feel. Because frankly, nobody wants to just sit around and watch a Zoom meeting, right? I mean, that's not good. I mean, you had to do it last 14 months, right? But no one really wants to do that. So what are the features and the connectivity you can create using virtual events that will take the fact that consumer behavior shifted so dramatically around events over the last 14 months and blow it out, make it amazing, make it incredible. And I think, the smart thing to do is follow the artist, follow the people who, are the core of the event, whether it's, musicians, if it's a music event, or, theater, the producers, the actors, the directors, or if it's a business event, the people on the stage. Like, how do you give them the tools to connect to the audience? And how do you give the audience the tools to not just connect to the people on the stage, but to the people around them, right? That idea, that sense of people around you, the hallways where a lot of the value of events happens. Like, where do you run into your friend when you go to the Independent to see that show? You run into them at the bar. That's usually where you see them, So how do you recreate that? And there's a lot of really smart people thinking about that right now. Some of them are friends of ours, or started companies in the space. And so I'm very bullish on it, but I think it'll have, it's going to take time to figure out, what works, what doesn't work. But the thing is, we just had like a full dog year. We had like 7 years in 1 year in the last year. So we figured a lot of stuff out. I'm excited about it.
Yeah, well, I am too. And, with some of the things you're talking about here, talking about the old technology, what's going to happen in New York City with all the office space now that most people are commuting? You think that 95% of the office space is empty right now. Do you think people are coming back to go back to offices when it's allowed? Or do you think everybody's going to get rid of that line item of office? And
you're going to see big companies line item shit out. When you're at scale, right? When you've got, 60,000 employees, right? And you've been managing to do just as well with all of them remote as you did when they were all in an office, you're going to sharpen your pencil and take 20 or $30 million out of your bottom line. You're just going to do that. And so I think that part of the market, big corporations renting entire skyscrapers, right? I think that part of the market is definitely going to take a hit, but that's good. Because what that makes possible is that smaller organizations that have been completely priced out of the real estate market can come back into the city. Like our company, we have 45 people. We're going to 80, this in the next 12 months. And we had one small floor in a cool building in the Flatiron district of New York City. And we haven't been in that building since early March of last year, right? So over a year. And we've been talking about this, and we've been talking to a lot of other people about it. Smaller companies like ours, we're going to go back. We're not going to go back the same way, but we're probably going to need roughly the same amount of space. Because even though I may not have all of my company in that building at once, I will want to have like all the time, like we used to. I will want to have all of the company in that building once or twice a week, right? And we'll use space differently. We'll have more jamming spaces, more creative spaces. Like the whole point of being together is like, that's where the most magic happens, when people are just riffing off each other and you have super high bandwidth human to human connection, right? So when we go back, our company, when we go back, we're going to take as much, if not more space, but we're going to use it totally differently.
Yeah, well, I definitely see it changing. Do you think also business travel, it's going to be, people aren't going to be traveling as much? Because that's one thing that didn't happen over this year. All these international trips and the hotel rooms and the expensive meals and the write-offs.
Yeah.
Do you think we're probably not going back to that either in a way?
I don't think we're going to go back to that in the way we did it. I think, look, I just look at myself, right? I mean, you travel because you have to go to a place and do a gig, right?
Right.
I traveled because I felt like I had to, and I didn't even know why. I did not know why. Like, I would just go, like, oh, well, I need to go to Chicago and, fucking drag my ass through 3 hotels and, have 12 meetings that end up doing nothing. Like, I will only travel when I know there's a high value for me traveling now. That is like, it's a new bar, right? What I'm not convinced about is that we won't, once this is really behind us, like a year or two behind us, and we really, we're over the PTSD of living in our apartments for the last 14 months. When we're past that, I don't know that we won't revert back to old habits. I am trying to brace myself to not do that. I want to travel really badly, but I don't want to go to a fucking conference. You know what I mean? Like, I want to travel because I want to see my family in California, my friends in California. I want to travel because I want to, go to a place I haven't been and I want to enjoy it, right? I want to go to a show. I want to go to Red Rocks, right? But I won't travel just because I feel like I have to. And now, I mean, this is a big part. I mean, I just raised a significant round for my company without having one face-to-face meeting. If you can do that, if you can close a venture round, without having a face-to-face meeting, without getting on a plane and going to Sand Hill Road and, going to Boston and going wherever the money is, if you can do that, keep doing it, man.
Yes. Well, I agree. And I kind of think that's the way it's changing. Our whole world is changing, and it's interesting to see how we go back to work. One of the other questions, do you have what's your opinion on this NFT craze that's going on right now?
I have called NFTs the seagull standing on the tip of the iceberg. Like, if you think it's about NFTs, then you're paying attention to the seagull and you're missing the iceberg.
Right, 'cause it's really about the blockchain.
It's really exactly what the NFT is a really elegant example of the power of what you can do, leveraging public ledgers, trustless environments, distributed, decentralized media. I think, first of all, I think NFTs are awesome. I think they're great. But you know what? When people asked me the same question in 1993 and they said, what do you think about this website? What are these websites? Are these websites a thing? And I'd be like, okay, it's not about the website. It's about the internet, like the internet, man. It's so fucking cool.
Right.
I'm like, well, isn't the website the internet? I'm like, no, that's the end node part where you can interact with the internet. But the underlying architecture is what's the amazing thing about it, right? The web is an application of the internet. It's a tool. It's a way to understand it, but it's not the thing. And to me, NFTs are the same thing. They're not the thing. And you could take, every aspect of an NFT and you could talk for 2 hours about it. What does non-fungible mean, right? What's fungible? Right? What about governance, and what about DAOs and decentralized autonomous organizations? And like, what about, there's all these different principles that feed into what an NFT is. And I think they're super cool, but we're, just like with the early web, there's way more hype, way more bullshit, way more fraud, than there is clarity and vision. Right. And that's great. That's how you get somewhere, right? I mean, the Wild West is called that for a reason, I mean, it's like you need the Wild West to figure out how to settle a town, you just do. And so I'm all for the hype, the bullshit, even the fraud, because it's how we figure out what's real. And so NFTs, which have been dismissed by a lot of people as a fad and as crazy and as, ridiculous, I wholeheartedly agree and think you're paying attention to the wrong thing.
Right.
It's
ultimately what makes that hum, and ultimately what you're seeing is an example of how blockchain works in the real world.
Exactly. NFTs are the big breakout thing since currency itself, right? Bitcoin was like, everyone confused Bitcoin and the blockchain. Well, now you can say, no, Bitcoin and NFTs are examples of applications of the blockchain.
How blockchain works.
And so now there's going to be more and more examples of that. And I think that's very exciting.
When do you see the end of money and world economy, a world dollar, and the decentralized banks? When do you see that all coming? Because it has to happen, right? I mean, the banks are all corrupt. I mean,
at the end of the day, we're complicated. Human beings are complicated, and we need to come up with systems to govern ourselves, or we run around, running into each other, pissing each other off, killing each other, injuring each other. We need governance systems. I'm not of the opinion of the libertarian utopia that, frankly, in the early days of Wired, when we were publishing the first, couple of years of Wired, we ran some pretty crazy shit, about how all this was going to end up. That, we ran this great essay by John Perry Barlow,
yes,
among many things, known as a lyricist for the Grateful Dead, which basically said governments of the world, we are the citizens of cyberspace. You're not welcome here, right? And then, what did we go and do? We settled the web. We settled cyberspace. We created governance. We created rules. Like, we kind of got to do that. So whether or not it's the central banks and the current instantiation of the US government or the local government that ends up being the government we choose is, to me, kind of besides the point. We have to have governance. We just have to.
Right.
And so how will they change is kind of the question I ask. And if you want to pay attention to this at a macro level and watch it for sport, watch the Central Reserve Bank, the Fed in the United States, and watch the Central Reserve Bank in China duke it out over digital stable coins, essentially fiat currency that is blockchain based. China's way ahead of us on that. They've been working on it for several years, and it's terrifying geopolitically to think of that stable coin becoming a world currency that is instantly usable by billions of people, right? And transmittable to everyone everywhere, absent the traditional controls that we have over dollar supplies, interest rates, all those tools we have out in the real world of fiat. That's the place I would watch, because I think that's where you're going to see the cracks, the fissures, and then the adaptations by the US government to realize that if they want to stay in control, if they want to stay in governance, they're going to have to adapt to a decentralized model. That's why I'm bullish on decentralized, because I'm like, there's so much value to it, but we still need to govern ourselves.
Well, John, you are an endless plethora of knowledge there. It is unbelievable how much is in that head. I feel like I could talk to you all day. There's just so much going on out there.
There really is, man. I appreciate the chance to come and chat with you. It's been fun.
Well, thank you. I love having you on. We went through an hour like that, and I went through like 6 questions and I actually took notes. I usually don't take notes, but you have so many different things you've been involved in. I wanted to make sure we touched on some of the things that I thought was really important. I think we got quite a few in today. I'd love to have you on again at another time.
Anytime, man. Anytime. Happy to do it, and appreciate the opportunity to, motor mouth with you.
Well, thank you. Love the Michelle and the kids, and I look forward to, hopefully, Outside Lands. You're going to have to come back out. That's Halloween.
Oh, dude, I'll be there. Don't worry.
All right, good.
I'm there.
I love it. I love to hear it. Well, thanks for coming on, John. Great to see you. Love to the family.
Great to see you. Thank you.
Right. There you go. The one and only John Battelle, ladies and gentlemen. You don't get too many more people that are plugged in and understand where we came from, how the whole internet started, how Google started. If you haven't read his books, The Search, which is like the definitive book on Google, John's had his ear to the rail for years. So please check out John Battelle's books, a Search blog, the Recount, and everything else he has going on out there. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Like I said, I am headed to Atlanta tomorrow for the Jake Paul fight. Very excited to see my friends down there. Meanwhile, my sponsors, Manscaped. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, even John knows You got to keep the boys nice and neat and tidy. And Manscaped is one of our sponsors here at 420 Live. We're lucky to have Manscaped. And if you hear that, that's precision with a little light there so you can see what you're doing. You don't want to get lost in those dark crevices. Your 420 Live code gives you 20% off your Manscaped and free shipping. So check out Manscaped. Your junk will thank you later. And also comes with like, ball toner. Get your reviver. And it also has some crop preserver. Yeah, you want to preserve the crops. The ball deodorant. These guys, they got great imaginations. Anyway, thanks everybody for tuning in. Thanks, John Battelle, for coming on. And we will see you either if I'm able to come live from our friends at if I'm able to come live from Atlanta, I will. If not, I'll see you next week from New Orleans. 420, we will be coming live from NOLA. So excited about that. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. Peace, love, and happiness, everybody out there. Big hug.